Oh, hi, cutie, and welcome to the ChrissieCast live from the compound, where I usually say I chat to interesting people from anywhere in the world. Today, I should say where I weep with interesting people from all over the world, because I'm so thrilled to tell you that the magnificent Eli Harwood, also known as Attachment Nerd on Instagram, agreed to sit down with me and talk all things connection, attachment theory, how we arrive at our own attachment style and how that impacts every relationship we have. Dip those quills in ink right now, Chrissie Casters, and have paper at the ready, because this is a scorcher. This is Eli Harwood. Welcome to the ChrissieCast, Eli Harwood.
Thank you so much. I cannot wait to chat through all this fun stuff with you.
Oh, my God. I've been trying to organise my thoughts, which is difficult on a normal day. But to sit down with you, it's really been an effort, because there is so much to talk about. You are the person that makes the most sense to me on Instagram, and that's really saying something.
Oh my gosh. That's such a huge compliment. I'm so happy to hear I'm making sense, because you never know.
You never know.
I'm just out there running my mouth, saying what's happening inside the brain
and the heart,
and hoping that it's making sense somewhere.
Now, you have a book coming out called Raising Securely Attached Kids, and I'm really pumped for that. But I've got a lot of work to do first before I get that book.
We all do. We all have a lot of work. I mean, that's if there's any takeaway from today's conversations, it's this. We're all works in progress. That doesn't mean we're failing. Do the best that we can with what we have and learn more so we can do better. That's what we're doing.
Yes. You released a book last year called Securely Attached: Transform Your Attachment Patterns into Loving, Lasting, Romantic Relationships. So I'm going to focus this chat on attachment theories and how you came to be known as the attachment nerd. And I feel like let's start with the basics. What is attachment theory?
Okay.
What are the different types, and how important is it for our healing journey that we start to identify our own?
Okay. So attachment theory is the idea that human beings are relationally wired. And when we come into life, we come into the arms of other people.
Yes.
We are required. There's no story, zero stories of a human baby walking out of a uterus and going, I think I'll be fine. Or like, these people aren't my people. I'm moving onwards, right? We are entirely dependent. Sometimes you can hear people referring to that initial period out of the womb as the fourth trimester.
Yeah.
Right? Because truly there's no capacity for survival without a caregiver. Attachment theory says this. It says we all require relationships in order to survive and thrive. And it says the quality of those relationships is very differential, right? So we aren't all born into the same caregiving experiences. So some of the arms we're born into are warm and calm and steady and predictable and relational. And some of the arms we're born into are dismissive, stiff, uncomfortable, distant, cold, scary. So what happens in those early developmental experiences in our caregiving relationships is affecting the way our brain shapes, the way that our mind is shaped, what we think, what we believe, how we relate to other people, our relational patterns, our sense of self, our confidence. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So, you asked me how big of a deal do I think this is? Obviously, I'm very biased.
Yes.
But I think it's a very, very big deal. I think that how we experience caregiving in our developmental years is massive in terms of how our nervous system develops, how our identity develops, and in terms of the ways that we continue to relate to people outside of those arms as we move forward in our lives.
Right. I want to offer my theory based on absolutely nothing but being a human being.
Great. That's something.
I feel like the reason that attachment theory makes so much sense to me is that it kind of, I don't know whether it supports or goes against my theory that we are sort of born like a blank canvas, and then we take on all of these things that shape who we are. And I feel like for me, at about 6 or 7, I started to change. I started to my character and my responses to who I was in the world and in my house started to change. And progressively, I felt like from that point, I became someone who was surviving in the world. And I look at a photograph of myself.
At 6 or 7? What was the change? What happened in your story at that age?
Well, my parents split up, and that was a terrible time. Of course, it always is, and I just feel like I hit survival mode at that point, and I've spent the last few years trying to get back to that the 6-year-old that felt like my authentic self.
Yes. Yes.
Were you?
What you're describing is, for a child, a trauma milestone. So, we can have, celebratory milestones and developmental milestones, but we can have trauma milestones, which is like there was something that happened here that really shifted your sense of safety in the world. So there might have been what we would describe as like a good enough experience before that of like, maybe mom and dad aren't perfect. They're not always exactly what you need them to be emotionally, but they're good enough. You have a sense of security. But when the divorce happens, and I don't know what type of a divorce it was, if it was high conflict or what role you had to play, all of that. But then all of a sudden it was like that security plummeted through the divorce. It kind of went down. And this traumatic experience led little 6-year-old Chrissie to feel deeply untethered.
Yeah.
And then to try to adapt in the world through more of a masking or, performing sense of survival.
Yes. I want to talk about trauma as well. Do you think that our individual reactions to trauma are personal? Like the same thing could happen to somebody else and it doesn't affect them.
Yeah, so I want to go back to what you said about being born a blank slate. So I don't think we're born a blank slate. I think that we come into the world with a temperament. And I think we are learning more and more and more about the fact that we also come into the world potentially with some of our ancestors' trauma. Epigenetics is the study of the way that our proteins process our DNA or our DNA processes our protein, one of those directions. And so I think we come into the world potentially with inherited trauma, but definitely with a temperament. And our temperament can be a benefit. It can be a protective factor, but it also can be a vulnerability and a risk factor, depending on the circumstance. And that's why we often see kids going through similar situations in terms of the outset, the story, and having very different responses to those situations and feeling differently, because I think we're not all equipped with the same hard wiring. We have different hard wiring. But how we feel about our hard wiring, that's attachment. So if I come into the world and I am a bouncing extrovert, but I'm born into a family of caregivers who is afraid of taking up space. And so I put on
that is an unfortunate that is an unfortunate situation. That's a lot of work right from day one.
Yeah. And I mean, this happens all the time. We call it a mismatch in the attach. It's like you come into the world and your caregivers are fundamentally wired differently, and then they don't understand you. And so they keep trying to get you to be wired differently. Yeah. Right. Like, don't do that. Okay. Not in public. Let's calm that down. We don't need, right. And so that vivacious, extraness that is inherently authentic to that child gets tamped down. And there's the masking that comes in, and there's the shame that comes in around it. And then there has to be healing later on in order to re-embrace that part of oneself and say, wait a minute, I actually just love to be silly, and I love to be out there, and I love to perform, right? And I've seen the same thing in reverse. A very sensitive, introverted child being born to caregivers who are wired for competition, for, going out there in the world and getting them. And why can't you just? And then a child who actually has an astute capacity for sensitivity in the world learns to shut it down and numb it out and develops a drinking problem as a result, or, learns to evade these parts of themselves out of fear of rejection by their caregivers and ultimately everyone else.
About generational trauma.
Yes.
I mean, this is a whole other idea. You've said that what happens in childhood doesn't stay in childhood. It integrates into our nervous systems, our relational patterns, and our sense of worthiness. What do you do to end the cycle of generational trauma? And can you tell us about what your mother did?
Well, I can just start by telling you my story, and then we'll talk about what that looks like in bullet points.
Great.
But my mom grew up in a situation where her mother had very little support. Both of her parents were dead before she was 22. And she had not experienced a lot of security as it was. So her father had been in and out of psychiatric institutions, which at the time were just like, not good, not a great place. There wasn't a lot of great treatment. And so she entered a marriage very quickly with my grandfather, who was someone with his own boatload of trauma. So when you look at my family tree, it's like, the ornaments are mental illness, addiction, sexual abuse, estrangement. Like, we're just kind of a hot mess.
Yeah.
And so, my grandmother's way of surviving was to be cold, judgmental, cut off, and disconnected from herself. That's how she survived all of her losses.
And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. We're all doing what we can to survive.
Yes. I do not look at any of my family members in judgment. I look at, you did the best you could with what you had.
Yeah.
And so what she had was a capacity to anesthetize herself from feelings, from emotions, and to tell herself a story. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Even though it clearly wasn't fine. My grandpa had an alcohol problem. He would rage. My mother was, speaking of temperament, a highly sensitive kid. And so, she comes into this environment with a mother who is not able to be co-regulatory and warm and supportive, and a father who goes on rages.
A classic mismatch.
Right? Yes, exactly. Classic mismatch. And so, she has a lot of childhood trauma. She also experiences sexual abuse 2 different times from different people close to the family. So she comes into adulthood with a ton of trauma and marries my father, who is a nice guy and has a very serious long-term addiction problem that he's actually never gotten over. And so in some ways, she doesn't marry her father because he isn't, the same personality type. He isn't gruff and mean and scary, but he also isn't present and relational, right? He's in his own stuff. He also had childhood sexual abuse. So my parents come into a marriage and then they have children. And, for her, that early process was just feeling like she was drowning. She doesn't have supportive parents. She doesn't have a supportive partner. She's pretty isolated. She also grew up in Hong Kong. So she's what we call a third culture kid, where she comes back to the States and has a hard time relating to people. So she has all kinds of risk factors and all of this. And she's highly sensitive. And so, my early experiences of my childhood are very much an astute sense of my mother's depression. I could feel it. It was palpable. I knew it was there. And I adapted to try to mother my mother, which is something that happens a lot in trauma. And I would argue she tried to mother her mother as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you can see that in even their current pattern. They're actually, my grandmother, my 94-year-old grandmother is living with my mother right now. So we're like watching all of these interesting patterns and analyzing them and assessing them all the time. But when I was around the age of 9, she hit a bottom and was at the point of really considering ending her life. And it wasn't the first time she had gotten there. And I have a deep sense of how many times she got there, just because I could feel it as a kid. I knew she was not okay. We'd be at home all day and she'd be under the covers. It was like she couldn't function. So at this point, what she did is she got help. And I would say the beginning of every generational trauma healing, the beginning of any form of cycle breaking, is always to get care for yourself, because it is incredibly hard to give the care our children need when we've never received it ourselves. It's foreign. We don't have it inside of us. And in order to regulate our children and be grounded, supported, secure parents, we have to have some sense of our own worthiness, of our own dignity, of our own needs mattering. Right? We can't self-sacrifice our way through to generational trauma breaking. That doesn't work. That's just a different version of the trauma, right? that trauma is still very alive and well, because that trauma is inside of our body saying what you need doesn't matter. It's only what your kids need that matters.
Yeah.
And so we have to pause and go get help. So what my mom did is she checked herself into a psychiatric ward here, and she got on meds, and she got the word depression, and she was like, this is what this is. This is what it's been, and this was in the 80s. So this was still very, hip. No one was doing this yet. It was before depression was depression,
Yes.
And then she just never stopped working on her healing. To this day, when she's off kilter and something's going wrong, she goes back to therapy. I just talked to her this afternoon, and I was checking in on her. I'm like, how you doing? She's like, I'm having a rough day, but I met with my therapist this morning and it really helped. I mean, come on. How awesome is that?
Gold star. Yeah. So this this sort of reached a crescendo. I mean, as you said, when you were 9, it reached the kind of identifiable crisis of her wanting to end her life. But every day before that, you would have felt and taken on her pain.
I could feel it. Yeah. I mean,
they do. Everybody does.
We're wired to co-regulate, right? So children can feel what we haven't healed. That's actually one of the chapters in my book, is they can feel what we don't heal, in the parenting book. But, when we do the work to go back, to look back and honestly emotionally acknowledge, this is what it felt like to be a kid in my family. Yeah. This is what it felt like to be vulnerable in the presence of my mother, my father, my parent. Like, this is what I had as an option, and this is what I did in response to that. When we let ourselves reflect and grieve, which means we actually have to feel the feelings about it. We have to, I had to do a lot of therapy. I had to cry on behalf of little Eli, who, was 3 or 4 years old and felt responsible to keep her mother alive. That's a lot of anxiety, and that's a lot of pain.
When your mother did seek help, how did she invite you on that journey of healing? What were the physical things that she did? Did she keep her recovery secret? Did she share everything with you?
No, I have this very vivid memory of her coming back from that initial hospital stay and bringing out 2 cups and explaining that a mother's job is to fill up her children's cups, to fill them up with water. But that if she doesn't fill up her own cup, then she won't have any more to give. And that she never learned how to fill up her cup. And so what she was going to start learning how to do is filling up her cup so that she could help fill our cups without feeling empty in herself. And I remember as a 9-year-old kind of going, okay, that's cool.
Whatever.
But she talked about it, and she brought us into therapy, and we went into therapy in different ways as a family. I mean, I wouldn't say that she was able to come out of that and know exactly what to do or how to be secure. It's not that fast, but it was a turning point, and it did feel hopeful. And I could feel that other people were helping my mom. And that was a huge relief off of me. It's not just my job. It's her therapist's job. It's her support group job. There are other people in the mix helping her see that she's worthy and lovely. And oh man, is she? My mom is a hoot. You would love her. She's a sassy old lady. And always has been.
I love a sassy old lady. They're the best.
For sure. And my grandma is too. But my grandma never healed. It's interesting. When I asked my grandma to tell me stories at all, any stories, so tell me some stories, she can't tell them because she's never been able to really fully face the emotions in her story. She's been running from them, right? And so, she can't go back and say, well, this happened and that happened, and this is what it felt like, and this is who I was, because that would mean she would have to address that she married a pretty abusive person, and it was really kind of awful, and he hated their children. What must that have been like?
Oh, it just sounds so miserable.
Yes.
She needs to do your workbook.
She has it. I signed one for her.
Well,
I don't think she's going to be doing the workbook.
I want her specifically to go to this page that made me go, oof.
What's the page?
The story of your childhood heart. Write the story of how your heart felt in relation. Oh my God. Why is this sad? Why?
in relation to your caregivers while growing up, share this with a trustworthy person and let yourself receive the care they offer in response. I haven't done this, but what a gorgeous process, all of it.
You want to do it right now?
No.
You've got me tearing up. I'm already in.
But I love the idea of, I read that and I thought, oh, yes, that's something that I could do. I love this. I love that because it's a private moment. I'm a writer and I've got a really good memory and I can, smell my kitchen and I can see my bedroom and all of that sort of stuff. And I thought, yes, I look forward to writing this story. And then the bit where it said, share this and receive the care. Oh, I thought, oh my God, I can do the first bit, but how do you do the second bit?
Yeah. Well, do you know how to find safe, warm, responsive people?
Yes, and I have them in my life, but I don't know if I want to give them that story.
Okay. So, in fact, it's required, and you have to send me an email after you do it. because what is wounded in relationship heals in relationship. And that experience of pain as a little person of being missed and misunderstood and disconnected and anxious and lonely and ashamed and like that painful feeling of like, I don't have any skin on. I'm out in the world and I don't have any skin on.
Yes.
That gets healed when you share it with warm, receptive, attentive people because they see that kid for the badass that she is. Right? They can look at you in those tender states and be like, of course. And also feel that heartbreak alongside of you that you didn't get witnessed and delighted in and understood and celebrated and held. And then you get to cry some tears about it. And there's a shift in the story because now there's not just a part of you that feels unworthy and untethered. Now this part of you is being held in the care of other people. And it shifts it.
You say that you've got to actively grieve and release the pain related to previous relationships. How do you do that? You say that when we let it out, it allows our body and heart to move forward. But what does that look like? Crying. Right.
It's crying. It is crying, and it's crying in different ways from different people. I have a very particular therapy session that I remember where I got to the heart of this memory, and the memory was simply my kitchen as a child and nobody else there. That's the memory. There's nothing happening, but in my body, the memory is my body feeling panic to the degree of I can't think, I can't talk, I'm alone in the world. That is what my body felt in this memory. And I don't know how old I am in this memory. I don't know. I know where the kitchen is. So I know I'm older than 5, younger than 17 because of when all the moves happened in my world. But when I was processing this memory with a therapist, I cried so hard I vomited in her trash can.
And it's like an exorcism.
Yeah, it's such a metaphor, right? It's like all of this stuff, all of this disturbing stuff that I didn't know how to metabolize, that I had held into my body because there was nowhere to put it, because I couldn't fall apart for fear of adding to my mom's despair.
And being a burden.
And I couldn't fall apart with my dad because he didn't know what to do with it. And God bless him. He wanted to, but we had conversations later on in my healing process where my dad said, well, no, you were fine. You always knew who you were. You came out of the womb. No. And I'm like, no, Dad, no 3-year-old is like full of self-awareness. Like I was 3. I was masking because I could sense that no adult in my environment could handle my emotional dysregulation. So I was regulating you because I knew you couldn't regulate me.
And also, you don't want to make people feel bad. You don't want to say, oh, well, first of all, as a child, you don't know how to say how you're feeling. And if you did, you don't want to tell them because you don't want them to feel like they have something else to sort.
You actually can't think like that.
No.
You know, like the way we're thinking is an adult reflection. You know, we can look back, but as a child, it's the only thing you know.
Yeah.
So what you instinctively know is I rely on these people. I cannot survive without them. I am reliant. And so if I don't feel secure, I'm going to fill those gaps in coping patterns and maybe even in self-contempt. Instead of thinking, my mom and dad are not enough for me, I need more. All of us go to, I am too much. Something's wrong with me. Because otherwise, what are we going to do? Start interviewing new parents? Not an option.
No.
Right? We don't let, there's no option for that. So yeah, we get caught in whatever dynamic we're born into or adopted into or fostered into. And we do the best we can with what we have, just like the caregivers. Although I will say this, I recently made a post where I said, it can be simultaneously true that your parents did the best they could with what they had and that it was inadequate for you to feel secure. And I got this chorus of voices in response to this post saying, I'm so sick and tired of they did the best they could with what they had. My parents were acutely abusive. Is the best my dad could have done is sexually abuse me? Is the best my mom could have done is allowed my stepdad to hit me? Is the best? And I felt like, that's right. Sometimes parents are abusive. And in that case, we don't have to offer them they did the best they could. And here's why. When children grow up in abusive homes, there is a trauma bond with caregivers and a guilt bond with abusive caregivers that makes it incredibly hard to get free and to take care of oneself. And so for folks who have launched away from abusive parents, it is too close to the line of getting sucked back in to feel compassion for them. It feels too close to, I'm going to have to take care of them now, or I have to go back into relationship with them. So all that to be said, I believe in my family, my parents did the best they could with what they had.
Me too.
I really do.
Yeah.
And they loved me. I really believe they loved me and love me. And they were not able to give me a secure experience in childhood because they didn't have it to give. And my mom was able to open up that package and begin to offer that. And then we've all had to do our own work to get there and deepen that and offer it to our kids.
Let's talk about this statement. Connection is what brings us calm.
I like to talk about the difference between calm and numb. So we have this, I think, mythology in Western culture, and we could dissect, where does that come from? Does it come from colonialism? It's the behaviorism of the 1900s. You know, there's all sorts of influences that lead us to certain mindsets, but we have a mindset that says feelings are frivolous, dangerous, not to be trusted, right? Logic is the higher power of the two, right?
And emotion and feelings are not to be shared.
Tamp it down. So I think that we often misuse the word calm to mean numb, calm down. What we really mean when we're telling somebody to calm down is stop feeling and stop sharing what you're feeling.
Yeah,
shut it down.
Yeah.
So I like to say, there's a difference between helping a child to calm down or helping ourselves to calm down and helping and experiencing shutdown. And calm is always relational. Calm is like, I belong, I am worthy, I can call a friend and say, this just happened, and I feel vulnerable about it. And they respond with empathy and support. And my nervous system goes, okay, it's going to be okay. Right. And that's very different than cut that out. That inner voice that's like, don't be such a wimp. Move on.
Stop feeling that. Stop feeling that. I don't want to hear it.
Right. And so we want to use relationships as a primary way of regulating ourselves. And these are safe, calm, secure relationships. I mean, that's why I'm making you do your homework assignment, because when you share about that tender state that you experienced as little Chrissie, the people in your life who are safe and secure are only going to fall more in love with you. And that is going to help you fall more in love with you. You will be able to look anew at that younger self and go, wait a minute, I was kind of cute and fun and, I deserved a lot more.
But I believe that about myself. It's the sharing it with someone else that feels risky to me.
Because there's still a fear that someone else might not feel that. And I think,
and also, you said before you used the words too much. I've always felt that I am too much on every level.
Well, and how healing would it be to be in the presence of people whose capacity for holding emotion is much higher and to experience not overwhelming them? How amazing would that be?
It would be amazing, but it also feels very risky, Eli. It feels very unsafe for me.
It is risky, but it's a good risk. I'm telling you, I've been doing this for long enough now, and I understand you're scared. And I think you got this.
Okay. I'm going to do it.
Here's the other thing. Here's the other thing. If you wait years and years and years to do this, and then you only give one opportunity for it to go well, and it doesn't go well, we've got a math problem, right? So it is also about learning to share your authentic self and stories on the regular. Because, some people will be awkward or say a weird thing or drop you in some way, shape, or form. But some people will meet you in a magical, magical way.
If you are the person, I know that there's going to be a lot of people listening to this going, I'm going to do that. And I've picked my person, my trustworthy person I'm going to share it with. If you happen to be that trustworthy person that receives this written account of vulnerability in the story of someone who loves you's heart.
Yes.
What is your advice for how they react?
Yes. Take a sip of what that person is feeling so that you can connect to the humanity of that emotion. You're not having to relate to what they're telling you because we all go through different things, but we all have the same set of emotions. So relate to the feeling state that they're sharing with you. But I'm saying take a sip. We're talking a sip of tea, not a chug, and definitely not the whole bottle, because then your dysregulation will only add to the fire. Take a sip, let yourself feel it, and then just stay. Stay present. Stay witnessing. Tell me more. I'm so sorry that happened. What else do you want me to know? Is there anything else about this story that you haven't shared that I can hold with you? You're a container of sorts. I am, you're virtually, emotionally, it doesn't even have to be in person. It's like, I am going to let your heart and your pain into my heart and my mind, and I'm going to hold it without asking you to clean it up or put it away or think differently about it. I'm just going to hold it with you and tolerate that emotional state with you, because the healing for pain is being in the presence of someone who is with you in that pain without losing themselves.
Yeah. I think it would be an extraordinary honor if I was chosen as somebody's trustworthy person. I would just be breathless with gratitude to be that person for somebody.
Amen. I call it sacredness. When my husband, early on, we were dating and we were out on a boat on a lake when we lived in Seattle at Lake Washington. We're out on this boat, and he is absolutely not someone who takes up a lot of space in the world. And he had been building up the courage to tell me about this experience when he was in first grade or third grade. I can't remember which one. And he got chosen to be the first chair for the trumpet. And he had two best friends who had been wanting more than anything to be first chair for the trumpet. And he got up to do his performance, and he was so overcome with empathy for his friends. He was so aware that they were feeling grief while he was in this trumpet triumph, right? That he froze. He froze, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And in front of all of these people, as first chair of the trumpet, he couldn't blow his horn. And it was humiliating, and it was this mix of all these emotions. And as he's sharing, I can hear that inner critic in his head, like, this is small. Because I've told him stories that are, pretty Lifetime TV. Things got real in my house growing up.
Yeah.
And so, he's comparing those two things. And I'm just thinking, no, all I can think is I love this tender man so much. I am so honored that he would share this with me, because I know how little he takes up space. And man, what a joy to understand tiny Trevor. what a gift. And it helps me understand him more and, why he gets so uncomfortable about public displays of affection, because in his mind, somebody in that room is going to feel sorrow about the fact that they are not being chosen right now. Right. So it's like, I don't know. Yes, it's sacred. And I don't care what the story is, how big or how small. When someone brings their pain to you and asks you to hold it with them and bear witness to it, you are being given the gift of intimacy and connection. Now, here's a little caveat. We have to let people soothe us. So if we share a story and we bring that pain and people offer us love and acceptance and support, it is our job to let it in. We have to let it change us. So we can ask for love and support, but if we don't let that love in, it actually creates sort of a weird dynamic. So if I say, I'm in pain, can you help me? And you say, I think you're wonderful and lovely and you deserve love and whatever. And I say, I don't know if that's true or not. And I reject what you've offered me and I don't allow it in. Well, it's going to be harder for you to want to sit with my pain in the future because I've left it with you. I've left you holding it instead of letting your love shift.
I feel like a lot of us are hardwired to dismiss that. How do we stop that kind of automatic, oh, don't be silly. Oh, no, that's not true. Do we just shut up and say, thank you, get into that practice?
I imagine in my mind that when I'm in my emotional states and I am in a place of distress or tenderness or whatever, that I'm in a body of water, that emotions are water. That's like a metaphor that I think really resonates for a lot of people. And I'm in that water and someone else is throwing me a life raft. Why would I push it away and continue to tread water? Why wouldn't I grab the life raft? Because I'm not asking for the life raft forever. I'm just letting it take me closer to shore.
Yeah.
Give me a moment of rest, right? And there may be a point in time when I've been in the life raft long enough and my legs feel strong enough that I throw it back to that same person. They need the life raft from me. And we take turns until we get to the shore. That's fine. But why wouldn't you take the life raft? What purpose does it serve your life to continue to stay in these old narratives that make you tread water?
Yeah,
why
who
not
wins?
get to the shore?
Who wins? Not you. Now, a lot is made of attachment theories and styles in relation to romantic partners.
Yes.
Am I broken irretrievably and forever if I feel deep in my core I don't have an interest in that?
You mean an interest in romance or an interest in attachment theory and romance?
Romantic partners. I just feel like I get so much calm and connection and a feeling of being seen from my friends that...
You don't want to crave that.
Yes, I know, but does that mean that I'm broken? Is there am I actively looking away from that for valid reasons, or am I avoiding something? Because I've done your little workbook and I'm definitely an avoidant.
That's what you do with your pain, with your tenderness and distress. Okay, a couple things. First of all, I let my publisher make the decision to put the word romantic in the title of my book. But if I had full authority over how I titled my book, it wouldn't have said romantic relationship.
Okay.
It would have just said relationship.
Great.
Because we can have secure attachments with our friends. We can have that deep belonging. And, I listen to people where they'll say like, well, she's my person, he's my person. And they're not referring to romance. They're talking about that attachment bond of like, we take care of each other. We show up for each other and we identify together as a result. You're my person, I'm your person. So no, I don't think you're broken. I also just don't think romance is for everyone. And I think that we live in a world where there's some really fucked up stuff that happens in romantic relationships. Like, frankly, if you're a straight woman, romance is very dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, call a spade a spade. I mean, in America, it's something like 5 million women a year are assaulted by their partners, and that's what's reported.
Oh, Australia has a massive problem as well. Huge.
So, I mean, like, I don't know. It's pretty smart to not want to be, assaulted by somebody in your house. We wouldn't pathologize that in other places. So I would say my hope for everyone is that you feel so deeply connected to your authentic self and your deepest desires that you allow yourself permission to risk wanting, to let yourself want. And if you find yourself wanting romance, but afraid of it, explore that. But if you just don't want it, who cares?
Eli,
you're really close relationships.
I've really like interrogated it, and I just can't find a single thing about it that's appealing.
You don't need it. You do not need it.
Do some people just not need it? We've been told our whole lives that it's the be all and end all, and I just don't care.
No. I absolutely, some people just don't need it. It's a choice, and every life path comes with losses and gains. And I would say romantic partnership comes with that. It comes with complexity. We are sold a story, and this is now becoming a much deeper conversation, right? Like we're sold a story about the path, right? Like this is what you're supposed to do. You go to college, you get a job, you produce something, you meet someone, you make that a state commitment, you get married in the church or the state or whatever, or both. You have kids. Like this is what a healthy, fulfilling life path looks like. And I just don't think that's true. And I think there are a lot of people who take that path and end up in misery as a result. I like to say, beware of the land of the shoulds. Once you start feeling like I should stop and pause and try and listen for the wants. What does I actually want? Like find true desire. And true desire is never to eat a bag of Doritos. So no shame on Doritos. We can trust that deeper voice inside of our body, for lack of a better metaphor, that says, follow this. This is where you desire. And I think what I hear from you is you desire a life without a romantic partner. There's desire around that. That's actually what you want. But then there's this other voice that's like, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to want that. Should I want that? Is this dangerous? What does that mean?
It doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel normal.
It is hard to make life choices that do not fall into the dominant narrative of what we're supposed to do. It is hard to do that. It takes courage. And you will live with people constantly going, why? What's that? Why not? Because they can't put you into a box and they don't understand you. But does it bring you joy to live freely in this way?
Yes. The answer is yes. But I still don't know the reasons behind it.
It doesn't matter. What does it matter?
I interrogate it
about it.
I do because everybody else is doing it, and there's a huge industry about it, and yes. I've really interrogated it with myself, and I never had the dream, there's this kind of trope that, little girls dream of their wedding day and they imagine what it's like to be in the white dress. I never had that. When I played with Barbies when I was 7, she never was interested in Ken. And, she had her Barbie townhouse and, she had a great job and she enjoyed her own bedroom. And I mean, that to me feels like it's in my DNA, but I don't know if that is who I am or someone that I've learnt to become. So I've got to go back to your workbook.
Yes, but also I would just say trust the process. Like you're not suffering in your singleness. You feel joy in your singleness. So if you were ambivalent about it, I would worry a little bit more. I would think, what's stuck? What's here? What do we need to, get out of the way so you can have clarity? I think you have clarity. You just live in a world that pressures you to feel differently than you do. And to that, I would say, just turn off the noise. Turn it off. This is your life. You get this one. As far as we know, we don't know what happens next.
Yeah, well, that's true. And I think it's probably just another one of society's messages that we've grown up with, and that one resonates with me. And for other people, it's choosing the gender of who they love. It's choosing whether or not to have children. It's all of that sort of stuff. I feel like if you ever kind of slightly veer off the lie that the story that we've been told, you do start to question the validity of that.
Well, every LGBTQ person ever has had to work through that process. Wait a minute. This was not the prescription, right?
Yeah. I feel this way. Ooh, I've been told my whole life I can't. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I even feel that as a woman who talks a lot. I mean, I grew up an empowered girl. I was told girls and boys are equal, but I also watched my government be filled with men and have very few women. I've yet to witness my country elect a woman to the highest office, So, and I grew up in churches where only men were pastors. So even though I was being told men and women are equal, girls and boys are equal, it didn't feel that way to me. And I could feel that the people in the pulpits had penises.
Yeah.
And so, I think to be an outspoken woman, giving a lot of people my thoughts sometimes feels like I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Like I can feel that there are people that are bothered by it, for sure.
I think earlier on in our chat, you were talking about emotions and that they're valid and that is what we need to embrace. And when you were talking about that, I thought it's interesting that I feel, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like broadly speaking, emotions are the domain of women, and that may be why they're shunned and seen as, irrelevant.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's a lot to be said about how gender operates to create order, an order that prevents us all from having that more authentic self process. And we neuter boys of their permission to connect to their emotional worlds, because men and women are not more or less emotional. Babies are not born in gender and in different ways. We teach our children what they're allowed to feel, what they're allowed to say. And they feel that based on what's modeled for them, what's around them, what's spoken to them. There's some really extensive research. There's a book called Real Boys by Dr. William Pollack out of the Harvard Boys and Men's Clinic, I believe it is called, where they've done a ton of research on this whole process and how unbelievably hurtful it is to our boys and men to cut them off from their emotional worlds, because we toughen them up when they're young, which means they don't get to emotionally mature. And then they come into adult relationships without a lot of the skills that women get to develop in our relationships. We're allowed to have feelings. We're allowed to talk about our feelings with each other, right? Because that makes us more vulnerable. And if we're more vulnerable, that kind of fits in the whole patriarchy thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of healing attachment wounds for men and boys is permission to feel.
Yeah, this is interesting too. I've got 2 boys and a girl, 3 kids. You've got the same, haven't you? 3 kids.
Yeah, 2 boys. No, yeah, 2. I've got 2 girls and a boy.
Right.
You've got 2 boys.
So
and a girl.
you've experienced both genders, and I mean, I have learnt so much about myself and human beings and everything from my children and becoming a mother. I mean, it's just been the most extraordinary gift to me. And one of the interesting things that I learnt, I had my 2 boys first, and then I found out that I was having a girl. And while I was pregnant with her, I thought, oh, well, this is going to be a completely different experience. She's a girl,
means something different.
Yeah, I'm obviously going to have to throw out everything I've done with my boys. And very quickly I realised exactly what you just said. Regardless of gender, you are born a human being with a temperament, and often, in fact, every time, there is no difference between girls and boys, and there is no difference in the way that I've raised my girls and boys according to their genders.
Yeah.
And I'm
the
asked
difference is
all
what they
the
face
time.
in the world.
Yes. And then you sort of deal with that bespoke to each human being. But, so many people say to me, oh, what is the difference? And I say to them, honestly, it's the same. They're the same.
They're people. What I would say is, yes, there can be slight differences if you look over like bell curves and research, but what we can't separate is how much of that is encultured and how much of that is biological. And I think like when you look at 2 human babies, boy, girl, intersex, there are 13 different chromosomal realities in the human genome. So
Yeah.
we talk about boys and girls, but there are 13 different ways that chromosomes form and survive. So there are people walking around the world who really aren't XX or XY. So what do we call them, right? They're intersex. They're babies. They need to eat. They need closeness. They need support. They have emotions. They feel sad. They feel scared. They feel, as they grow, they feel ashamed. They feel jealous. We have so much more shared humanity than we have difference. And if you were to meet my 3 kids, if I was to dress up one of my twins as a boy, everyone who ever met her, everyone who had gender ideas would say, boys will be boys. Look at that boy. Her behavior fits boy stereotypes. She's high sensory seeking. Her love language is wrestling. She's rough and tough.
She sounds like a hoot.
She's a brute. But she's a brute in bows. She likes a bow. She likes some bling, whatever. But no one is looking at her and going, oh, she's such a girl, because it's just, we weren't enculturated to see her behavior like that.
Yeah.
Instead, she's a firecracker, she's a whatever, but it's not attributed to her gender. Whereas if, she was a boy, it would be. And my son and my other daughter share more of a temperament. They're more sensitive. They're, and he has a lot of that kind of typical cisgendered identification. You wouldn't look at him and be like, oh, that's kind of an interesting kid. You'd just be like, oh, he looks like a boy's boy. But he's complex. And my hope is that, he gets to hold on to all these different truths about himself. He loves to bake, and he's an incredible baker, actually kind of savant level. He makes macarons. It's crazy. He's 9 years old.
My God, can he move in? This is amazing. I love a macaron.
Okay, next time we're down under, we'll make you some.
Eli Harwood, we are going to catch up again when your new book is released. It is all about parenting. I've got a lot of homework to do before then, and I'm guessing a lot of people listening are going to as well. As an entree to that chat, I want to thank you for a post that I visit at least once or twice a week. And I'm going to read them out here because I feel like every parent needs to hear this, but also it does apply to yourself if you're trying to reparent yourself. Amen. I have found.
Amen.
So here it is. If you're listening to this, get a pen or whatever, because you're going to, or follow Eli on Instagram. You'll be able to find this. Her Insta is Attachment Nerd. Now, full disclosure, when I first read this, I printed it out, and at dinner, much to the cringe of my 3 kids, I looked each of them in their beautiful little eyes and their gorgeous little faces, and I said these words to them. And regardless of how uncomfortable maybe it made them feel, I'm glad I did it, and I will do it regularly. Here is the Bible. And if you've got kids, tell this to their faces. You won't believe the response. There is not a single thing in life that we can't figure out together. Mean it. Make sure they know that. Next, you can ask or tell me anything. Literally, I will always be a safe place for the weird, scary, or awkward conversations. This is equally important to say to yourself in the mirror if you need it. This is my favorite one, my favorite. This one I could barely get through, Eli, without a little weep, and I may weep again. It is not your job to make me happy. It is your job to figure out who you are and be true to that. I mean, yes.
Amen.
Amen. If you tell me that someone is hurting you or scaring you, I will always believe you no matter who it is. That's important.
It's huge.
And this one, oh my God. This one I've only just been reminded of, and I am getting this made into a decal for my wall. I will attribute it to you. Let's finish on this, Eli. Imagine the power, if you're listening to this, imagine the power of hearing this from your mother. You don't owe me anything. I brought you into this world, and the joy of being your parent has given me more than I could ever have imagined. I mean, yes. Do this to your kids. Do this for your kids and see how they react.
My mother said that to me when I was in junior high school. She took me out to lunch. We went to a place called Healthy Habits. It was like the salad bar. Doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, God, I used to love a salad bar. Oh, they don't exist anymore. Something to do with salmonella, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was absolutely a health risk. But we went to Healthy Habits, and she did, kind of the white lady's version of that rite of passage, right? The bat mitzvah, the bar mitzvah, the quinceañera, like the thing that we don't have. We've lost that, right?
And did she just make that up? She was just like, this is the tradition that I'm starting. Oh my God, I love this.
And she sat me down and she just told me how proud she was of me. We talked about different kind of growing up things, and she shared some of more vulnerable parts of her story that she'd never shared with me, things she wanted me to know going into adolescence. And then she said, and I want you to know, you don't ever owe me anything. And she said, if you need to go far and wide in the world, go far and wide. I mean, it was like so powerful to me because she lived in a constant sense of guilt under the leadership of her generational trauma. And she didn't want me to feel that way. And I don't. I really don't. And I love her and I will take care of her. And she lives 6 minutes from me now because I made her move that close to me because I want her around. There's moments. We have a normal relationship. She annoys me. I annoy her. Stuff happens, but I adore her. And part of why I'm free to adore her is I don't feel obligated.
Yeah.
I'm free to choose. It's a powerful gift.
It is a powerful gift. You are a powerful gift to the world, Eli Harwood. I cannot wait to speak to you again once I have utterly consumed your new book. It has been an absolute joy.
I love to be here with you.
Thank
you for being a seeker and a grower and someone who wants to examine life so fully.
Even though I'm very frightened, I'm going to email you after I have written my story and found that trustworthy person. I think I've got them in my mind.
You've got this.
Do you have to give them a heads up that this is coming?
I think that's probably a smart idea. You don't want to do it when they've only got a 10-minute break at work, right? Like, hey, can we find some time? I'm doing some personal work and I want to share a little bit of my kid stuff. And I think you're the person I feel the safest with.
And logically, like physically, how do I do it? Do I send an email? Do I print it off? Do I send it to them in the mail and let them digest it? And then we talk, like, how does it work?
You got to read it to them.
I've got to read it to them.
Mm-hmm. Because we need you to feel the gift of their presence.
And then you
and
cry
they need to
during
feel the
it.
Emotion from you.
Yeah, and then you'll cry during it, and that's the release of pain.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Man, you are changing lives, Eli Harwood. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, God, I have homework and I've run out of tissues. Stay tuned for that. I think I'm actually going to do it and then invite someone into the studio and see if I can accept their care. Woof. And also stay tuned for another chat with Eli about parenting and how to nail it. That's coming up later in the year. I can't recommend following Eli on Insta enough. You'll find her at Attachment Nerd and you'll just love what she has to say about pretty much everything. As always, pop a follow to the ChrissieCast to see video footage from all of these chats and more. Till next time, ChrissieCasters.